Good second.
Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 4 to 10. Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou comest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. And then I said, Ah, Lord, God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child. But the Lord said unto me, Say not, I am a child, for thou shalt not go to all that I shall send thee, and whatsoever I command thee thou shalt speak. Be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee, to deliver thee, said the Lord. Then the Lord put forth his hand, and touched my mouth. And the Lord said unto me, Behold, I have put my words in thy mouth. See, I have this day set thee over the nations, and over the kingdoms, to root out and to pull down, and to destroy, and to throw down, and to build, and to plant. May God have his blessing.
The theme that we've started, gleanings or thoughts from Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Not all on one night, but this morning we started a new series for the morning services, where, God willing, we look at the first 7 chapters of Leviticus and look at some of the different things that goes on there, the offerings and the various types of offerings, their meanings and that type of thing. I know they're relevant for us today. Leviticus is one of those books where, we think, oh, is it relevant for us? There's so many rules, so many regulations there. But really, the regulations is all about building a relation with God in the Old Testament. That's what the book is about. And whereas we look at it with commands of saying, you shall not do this or you shall do that. For instance, I read of one writer and he said, well, it's not just a command, you shall not steal. It's written in a tone that says, surely you won't steal, because of your relationship with God. And so we'll be looking at some of those offerings, the burnt offering and the meal offering, the peace offering and the sin offering and the guilt offering. So we look at those and we try to bring into it what Jesus, how that represents what Jesus has done for us in his one complete offering. And I hope it'll be of some benefit for each and every one of us. And the book won't frighten us so much that we won't keep away from it. It's right in the middle of the story of Israel's walk with God. It's the center book. It's at the heart of what makes Israel beat. And so we'll have a little look at that over the coming weeks. And then in the evenings we'll be looking, God willing, at Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Well, with Jeremiah, we did Isaiah's call last week. This week's Jeremiah's call. And his call is a little different from the others. They all differ. Sometimes there are little contrasts, little comparisons. There's little different ways of doing things. Other times they seem to be 3 people whose ways meet in one channel. It's very much how life is very often. You can be like chalk and cheese, but then you realize as you go down in your path of following Christ, you find out that you've got a similar path to walk upon. And so we find with Isaiah, in his call, we know or understand that the time when God really appeared to him, he had already been in service. He'd already been in service. God had already spoken to him, challenged him, brought some truths home to his own heart. And yet in Isaiah chapter 6, we find that God brought him to that place where he says, here am I, send me. And so God gave him that ministry. With Ezekiel, we know how old he was when he first received this great call from God. He was a priest, he was born into the priesthood, and he would have been someone that would have studied for the priesthood, that would have been nurtured for the position that he was to hold. What position he was to hold, I don't know. But at the age of 30, he received something special from God for him. He was 30 years of age, maybe just a little bit older. With Jeremiah, we find that he is a child. Now, when we read in the authorized version of child, it can go from an infant to a young adult. So it can be from an infant right through to a late teenager. It covers that range. But as far as the Bible is concerned, he was a child. He was a youth. He was someone that had very little life experience. And God spoke to him. We find with Isaiah that God spoke to him in the place that he worked, in the temple. We find with Ezekiel that he spoke to him in another country. He wasn't at home. He was amongst a group of people that had lost the song that God had once given them. You remember that song? We remember it more these days, for it hit in the charts in the 1980s by the rivers of Babylon. We sat down, we wept when we remembered Zion. And our enemies said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? He sat amongst those people, and he saw and felt and heard and tasted the utter despair of it all. And then God spoke to him whilst he was in captivity. Jeremiah was probably in his hometown when God spoke to him. Isn't it wonderful the way God does things? There are some that could be in a place like the temple, and God can speak to him. There are others that are in deep despair, where they can't do anything about what the position they're in, yet God can speak to them. And then we have young Jeremiah, but a child, in a town called Anathoth. He wasn't even a townie. He was a backwoods boy. We would call him a valley lad. He was away from the big city. And there, God spoke to him. You see the different range that God has, the ability he has to communicate. He can speak to you where you are. What a wonderful thought that is. At the time of his call, we are told that the word of God came to him in the 13th year of the reign of King Josiah. Josiah was that boy king. He was a king at 8 years of age. Can you imagine that? Being given responsibility. Obviously, he's not going to be able to take decisions, and there would be others, counselors, that would act on his behalf. But at the age of 8, he became king. We're told this concerning Josiah. In the 8th year of his reign, when he was 16 years of age, he began to seek the Lord. 16 years of age. By the time that Jeremiah is being called, 5 years later, Josiah the king is 21. And already the effect, the impact of young Josiah getting converted was having a tremendous impact upon the land of Judah. We are told very early on, it says in the 18th year of his reign, that he sought to restore some of the feasts of God. But prior to that, during that period between the time when he was 16 to the time when he would have been 26, Judah knew a tremendous cleansing in the sense of idolatry and the pillars and altars that were built here, there, and everywhere. This young king brought a reviving spirit back to the land of the people of the Jews. And he was one that was able to be an inspiration. Now it's in the 13th year of his reign, when Jeremiah is but a child, that God speaks to him. You see, what I find very often with God is that very often it's just a single door or a single window that has to be opened and things begin to happen. It almost becomes a ripple effect. When a person is affected, we see it in the home sometime, don't we? I remember the days when Roger and Dorothy came back into the church in Caerphilly in 1977, 78, and the impact it had upon, from Clive right through to Caroline, the effect that it had upon them, it changed the whole household. has that a ripple effect, see? It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it has the negative effect that people turn around and say, well, I don't want what you got. But when God moves in a soul like Josiah, we find that there is a young boy there. We don't know how old he is. He might have been a young kid, he might have been a young teenager, he might have been mid-teens, high teens. But we know this, that God spoke to him. He spoke to him. The word of the Lord came to me. It's likely that he would have been in his home. Very often the grass is always greener just outside the home. Looking for adventures outside of the home. But it was a home where God could speak to him. As a young child, we are told that Samuel, it's that same word again, he could have been a babe, a child, in the sense of how we would look upon it today, or he could have been into his teens. But we're told this one night, when he was about to lay his head on the pillow, a voice came to him, and what always astonishes me, it's at evening time, it's at the time when it's getting dark, and a voice speaks to the young child, simply saying, Samuel. And yet the voice seemed so familiar. It was a voice that he'd never heard before, and yet, in one sense, it didn't bring any discomfort to the young lad. 3 times he calls. It's the patience of God again, isn't it? 3 times he calls. Not just with youngsters, but with some of us older ones as well. 3 times he'll call, sometimes more, pleading, urging, wishing you to make that step forward. Samuel, as a child, heard the voice of God. We read of Joseph, the son of Jacob. At 17 years of age, he was accused of this. Here is that dreamer. Do you know what it means? Here is that master of dreams. He wasn't just a dreamer in the sense of just dreaming his life away. He'd become, even as a 17-year-old, he'd become acquainted with the dealings that God would have with a human heart. He became a master of dreams in his teens. In his teens. We find with some others, don't we? When youngsters are brought to that place where they give their life to Christ. We read of David, again a teenager, and yet we're told he had this testimony as a teenager, and the Lord was with him. In fact, it was in his teens that the statement was made. The Lord was with him from that day forward. It's marvelous what God can do. We feel that we have to be in some sort of position of respectability. But a youngster can know the workings of God within their hearts. We read of Daniel and his 3 friends. When it would seem from the account that Daniel gives, it would seem that everyone else had followed the way of the Babylonians. Daniel and his 3 friends, teenagers they would have been, that were willing to say, no, we're not good. As Christine said, and as I said last week, we have decided to follow Jesus, and we're not turning back. A marvelous thing for God to speak into the heart of a teenager, into the heart of an infant. Phil Wright was saved at 6 years of age. Jack Spencer was saved 6 years of age. As David once said to me, Jack never knew what it was to have a pie and a pint. Never knew that. God had saved him from it. When you come across people that have acquainted themselves with the boozer from time to time, we see not everybody pays the price, not everybody pays the price, but even one paying the price is enough. When you see when it's in full action, and they've got no control on the urge to drink. You see, God can move within the hearts of those that are tender. Are you young today? Is he calling you today? Is he speaking to you today? are you they who once heard his voice in former days, when you were young and tender? And just like this young lad here, listen to his response. He's a reluctant recruit, our Jeremiah, a reluctant recruit. The word of God comes to him and says, do you know, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. I've listened to some tragic stories over the years of what individuals have been born into. I sat with a lady about 2 months ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, sat and no connection with this church, sat and listened to her. Left by mother and father, put into a position in a home where they were going to look after, abused. And yet a day came when she gave her life to Christ, and he breathed into her heart words of great comfort, that even though the sorrow and the pain that she was born into, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. It breathed life into her soul, that even there in the despair of that hour, when a young child has no understanding of what's going on around them, God is able to speak in latter days, when so often bitterness sets in, doesn't it? We listen sometimes to friends and relatives, and they talk of former days and the bitterness that's left behind of what it was like for them in their young days, in those formative years. Before you were in the womb, before I formed you, I knew you. I knew you. And I set you apart. A marvelous thing, isn't it? You say, but how can God know it? Let's go back to this king, Josiah. 300 years before now, before Josiah was born, a prophet spoke and said, listen now, he said, there will come a king. He will be a good king. He will be a king that will serve the Lord with all his heart. If you read the account of what Josiah did, it infers that he's the greatest of all Israel's kings. It infers that. It certainly seems that David is held as the great standard, but it seems that Josiah exceeded David, exceeded Jehoshaphat, exceeded Hezekiah. And this is what the prophet said. This king that will be born, that will do my will in his day, his name shall be called Josiah. 300 years before he's born. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you, and I called you, and I set you apart. Can you think of words in the New Testament where someone says that? Paul says it, don't he? Writing to his friends in southern Turkey, in Galatia. He writes to them and said, God, who separated me from my mother's womb, and called me by his grace to reveal his Son in me. It's a marvelous thing. When you have God involved in a family, when you have the Lord involved in your life. But what of those when he's called to them, beckoned to them, he's spoken to their hearts, challenged them, but oh, they've been so reluctant. And like Jeremiah, they've been wishing that it just could be someone else that God would pick on. And yet when they look back in hindsight, they see that life wasn't what they thought it was going to be. The purpose wasn't there. The hope wasn't there. The challenge wasn't there. Oh, they got this, they got that. They might have had a good job like Christine. Some of you might not have had a good job. But life just hasn't found its fulfillment. The wonder of God is this, that you're no longer a teenager, you're no longer a child, you're no longer an adult. Yeah, you are an adult. You're no longer young and tender. You've now had life experience, you've had bitterness, you've had walls that you've run run into and you've had obstacles that have got in your way and you've found yourself defeated, thank God we have a God in heaven that is able to restore us. That we might have ignored his call in those early days, we might have put it off, but there is a way forward with Christ that he's able to stir our souls. And so Jeremiah turns round and says, Lord God. Wait a minute, I forgot what he said. Almost like, remember Gwynfor? Wonderful, wonderful words of Gwynfor. We'll never replace him. When he took that service and said, we had a brother over from India, Prakash. And Gwynfor said this in a Crusader meeting. And who can ever forget what Gwynfor said? And then as you looked at him, you knew he'd forgotten what Prakash had said. No. Is it? I said that right then. No. Who can ever forget what Prakash said? And as he's looking at his eyes, he's looking at you and think, I can't remember what Prakash said. There's a way forward to our Lord God, he says. I cannot speak, for I am but a youth. The range of excuses that we use. I'm too young. David wanted, one of my favourite characters of the Old Testament, in one of those books where his name is hidden away. Hardly anyone knows, or Roger knows what I'm going to say now. His name was Barzillai. He was in his 80s. He was as deaf as a doorpost. His eyesight was failing. He could not hear the voice of singing. His taste buds had gone because he said, I can't taste food anymore either. And David invited him over the river. Come and join us in the river. That's what we sing, don't we? Come and join us in the river. And Barzillai said, no, he said, I can't hear. I can't taste. I'll be at the king's table. As far as I'm concerned, I'm taking a seat that someone else should benefit from. My ears have gone, my eyesight has gone, my mind is not what it was. It's no good. You see, you can be 12 or you can be 100, and you can still have the same excuse. I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too busy, I'm too involved. I have a family, I have responsibilities, I'm too lazy. All the different excuses that we can put before God. But the Lord is very patient, see? He's very, Lord God, he says, I'm but a child. Lord God, I'm but a youth, I cannot speak. Moses said, I cannot speak. He said exactly the same words, didn't he? Either because of an impediment or because he couldn't speak the language. That he was so thoroughly Egyptianized that he would make mistakes that I make today, where you say the wrong word in the wrong place. I can't speak. Get someone who's used to it, who is able to speak the lingo. Or it might have been because he had an impediment. I don't think there was an impediment. Because Stephen says concerning Moses that he was mighty in word and in deed. That doesn't suggest an impediment. But having said that, Mr. Brewster had a speech impediment and became one of the finest evangelists that Britain has ever seen. You see, we have our limitations. I can't do that. But you know, with God you can. Carol Cooper has that saying, let go and let God. And so he had these different excuses. The excuse for him was this, I cannot speak. Thankfully, the Lord ignored it. He ignored it. I knew you. I knew what you were going to be like. It's lovely when you're prepared for things, isn't it? When you're properly prepared. And something goes wrong, and you're prepared for it. See, the Lord prepared for these things. I can't speak. I'm too young. But I'm going to send you. It almost ignores it. I'm going to send you. I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to establish you. And so he speaks to him in this tone. And young Jeremiah is finding the corners. He's in a barrel now. He can't find a corner anywhere. He's got nowhere to run. And And God is speaking to him. I'll send you, he says in verse 7. I shall speak to you, he says in verse 7. And I shall be with you, he says in verse 7. Have you noticed how very often, when God's speaking of his relationship with the people, he says this one little letter word, I. I'll send you, I'll speak to you, and I'll be with you. Those of you that come to the studies on a Tuesday night, when we did the book of Exodus, and Neil did, I think it was chapter 5. And when he went through it was like a chapter I'd never read before. And he picked out just one little term, I. I will save you, I will deliver you, I will be with you, I will take you, I will protect you, I, all the way. And so we have, if you notice how much of divinity is involved in God's salvation for you. Have you noticed that? If you notice that it's not about me, it's about him. It's not about you, it's about him doing what you can't do. And he can send you. He can speak to you. He can be with you. Let's have a little look as we bring it to a close. Verse 9 says, he touched me. He touched me. Verse 9 goes on to say that he inspired me. He would give him words to speak. And verse 9 says he established me. This young boy has had the call of God upon his soul. And he's finding that the call, they call it in some of the theology books, an irresistible grace. Irresistible grace. Grace saved me, grace kept me, grace leads me. And so here, he speaks to this young lad. And he's speaking to him, he's not terrifying him. Don't be afraid of their faces. Do you know, a furrowed brow can stop your ministry like that. If you pay attention to it. A frown, a furrowed brow, a little sneer can undermine a person's ministry with a click of the fingers. Don't you be afraid of their faces, he said. I will make, like Ezekiel, I will make your forehead like brass against them, if you stay true to me. Well, let's quickly close. It's just gone 7. My apologies, it's a bit longer than what I expected. Verse 10 says this would be his ministry, to root out and to pull down, and to build and to plant. He didn't bring a new idea in, because his message was this to the people: seek out the old paths. Didn't bring a new message, brought the old message. They become so conformed to their religious life that they had nothing of the breath of God within their souls. He's yours here tonight, you hear him, Andrew and Gwyneth. But his first church, the treasurer got saved. He'd been there for years. Been there for years. He was a good man. But then in the church, he got saved. That's what it means to root up and pull down. You see, that you don't rely on some sort of form, but your heart rests on Christ alone. To root out and to pull down, not to bring in a new way, to bring in the old way of walking with him. And he was to build and to plant. This came to a boy who was but a child as far as God was concerned. As far as the writer of the book was concerned, but a child. Be that a child of just a few years, or be it a teenager. Is God speaking to you today? To draw closer to him. And some of us older ones, is he speaking to us today, reminding us, what about that time I spoke to you? And you said you were going to do this and do that, but things got in the way. You made decisions that were the wrong decisions. What about renewing now that relationship? The challenge is there, see? The challenge is there.